Let me ask you something that you have probably never said out loud. Why did God let this happen to me? I was faithful. I was trying. I was doing everything right. And still, the diagnosis came. The marriage fell apart. The job disappeared. The person you loved most left. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, a thought crept in that you were too afraid to say in church. Maybe God doesn't care. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe good people don't go through things like this. Not give you easy answers. Not hand you a bumper sticker and tell you to smile. But actually open Scripture and show you 3 people who asked the same question you are asking right now. And what God showed them will change everything about how you see what you are walking through. Stay with me, because the first person I want to show you was described by God himself as blameless and upright, a good man, by God's own definition. And what happened to him next will shock you. Job, chapter 1. The Bible introduces Job in the most deliberate way possible. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. Blameless, upright, God-fearing. And then, in a single day, he lost everything. His livestock, gone. His servants, killed. His children, all 10 of them dead. And then, his health. Painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. His wife told him to curse God and die. His friends, the people who should have held him up, told him he must have done something wrong, because that is what we do. When someone suffers, we look for the sin. We look for the explanation. We look for the reason that makes us feel safe, because if they suffered because of something they did, then as long as we behave, we are protected. But Job did nothing wrong. God said so himself. And Job 3:11 records the rawest prayer in all of Scripture. Why did I not die at birth? Why did I not perish when I came from the womb? This was not a man who lost his faith. This was a man whose faith was being forged in fire so hot that the only honest thing he could do was scream. And God did not strike him down for it. He let him scream, because God can handle your honest anger more than he can use your performed peace. But Job is only the beginning. Because the second person I want to show you suffered for 13 years. Not 13 days, not 13 weeks, 13 years. And during every single one of those years, he had done nothing to deserve what was happening. And at the end of those 13 years, the reason became clear. And it will leave you breathless. Genesis 37. Joseph, 17 years old, his father's favorite, a dreamer, and his brothers out of jealousy threw him into a pit, then sold him as a slave, then told their father he was dead. Joseph arrived in Egypt, not as a guest, as property. He worked faithfully in Potiphar's house. He did everything right. And then Potiphar's wife lied about him, and Joseph went to prison for something he did not do. Think about that. A 17-year-old boy sold by his own brothers, enslaved in a foreign country, imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. 13 years of this, and where was God? Genesis 39:21 answers that quietly, almost like a whisper. But the Lord was with Joseph. Not God removed Joseph from prison. Not God explained what he was doing. Just the Lord was with Joseph. And then, in Genesis 41, in a single conversation, Joseph went from the prison to the palace, from slave to second in command of all Egypt. And when his brothers finally came before him, terrified of what he might do, Joseph said something that should stop us all. Genesis 50:20. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. The pit was not punishment. The prison was not abandonment. Every dark chapter, was preparation for a purpose so large, Joseph could not have carried it without them. Let me ask you, what if the thing you are walking through right now is not the story? What if it is the preparation for a story so much larger than what you can currently see? But I saved the most important one for last. Because Job shows us that good people suffer without explanation. Joseph shows us that suffering is sometimes preparation, but the third person shows us something that changes everything, something that makes every other suffering mean something. And his name, you already know. Before I show you the third, if this is speaking to something you are walking through right now, type "I needed this today" in the comments. Just those 4 words, because I want you to know you are not invisible. Your suffering is not invisible. And what I am about to share in the next few minutes, I believe is the reason you found this video today. Isaiah 53:3, written 700 years before Jesus was born. He was despised and rejected, a man of suffering and familiar with pain. Familiar with pain, not acquainted with pain from a safe distance. Familiar, the way you are familiar with something you live with, something you know deeply, something that has shaped you. Jesus, the Son of God, was familiar with pain. He was born in a stable to a family of humble means. He was doubted by those closest to him. He was betrayed by a friend. He was abandoned by his disciples. He was falsely accused. He was tortured. He was crucified. And from the cross, he cried the words of a broken person, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The most important person who ever lived asked the same question you are asking today. Why? And here is what that means for you. Hebrews 4:15 says, "We do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are." Every way, which means when you bring your suffering to God, you are not bringing it to someone who watches from a comfortable distance and offers theoretical comfort. You are bringing it to someone who has been in the same darkness, felt the same abandonment, carried an unbearable weight, and walked through it. And because he did, Romans 8:28 became possible. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him. All things, not the comfortable things, not the things that make sense. All things, the betrayal, the diagnosis, the loss, the years that felt wasted, the prayers that felt unanswered, all of it, in the hands of a God who is familiar with pain, can become something that saves lives. Just like Joseph's pit became a palace, just like Job's ashes became abundance, just like the cross became the resurrection. So, what do you do with this right now? I want to give you 3 things to hold on to when the suffering does not make sense. And the third one is what I want you to write down. Number 1, stop looking for the sin. When Job suffered, his friends looked for what he had done wrong. They were wrong. God said so. Not all suffering is punishment. Not all pain is consequence. Some suffering is simply the weight of living in a broken world, alongside a God who is working in the unseen. Stop asking, "What did I do to deserve this?" Start asking, "What is God doing in this?" Number 2, trust the 13 years. Joseph's story did not make sense for 13 years. Yours may not make sense for a season that feels unbearably long. But Genesis 50:20 was written from the other side of those 13 years. You are not at the other side yet. You are in the middle of a chapter, not at the end of the story. And in the middle of chapters, things rarely make sense. Middles are not meant to be understood. They are meant to be survived, with faith. Number 3, And this is the one I want you to write down. Your suffering has a witness. Psalm 56:8. You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment you held it together when you were falling apart inside. God recorded it. Not one drop was wasted. Not one night was invisible. Not one prayer went unheard, even when it felt like it hit the ceiling and stopped. He was collecting it, all of it, for something you cannot yet see. Let me leave you with this. Job did not get an explanation, eventually. He got something better. He got God. Not a theological explanation, not a detailed plan. He got God. In Job 38, God showed up and spoke to Job out of the storm, and Job 42:5 records what Job said after. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. The suffering, as brutal as it was, brought Job to a place of knowing God that he had never experienced before, not knowing about God, knowing God. And I wonder if the thing you are going through is not destroying your faith, but deepening it in ways that comfortable seasons never could. I wonder if, on the other side of this, you will have your Job 42:5 moment. When you look back and say, I heard about you before, but now I know you. If good people go through the worst things, it is not because God has abandoned them. It is because God trusts them with a story that will one day help someone else survive theirs. Your suffering is not the end. It is the preparation. And if you are carrying something today that feels too heavy, please reach out to someone you trust. A friend, a pastor, a counselor. God also works through people. If today reached you, save this video. Come back to it on the days when suffering stops making sense, and share it with one person who is asking why. Someone who needs to know. They are not being punished. They are being prepared. And God has not missed a single tear.